Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're your shortcut to getting informed, taking a whole stack of sources and, well, pulling all the key stuff for you.
That's the plan.
Today, we're plunging into something big that's buzzing across Canada, these nation-building projects.
Yeah, huge projects. We're talking ports, railways, pipelines, energy infrastructure, you name it. And there's this real push to build them faster, much faster.
Exactly. And right at the center of that push is Bill C-5. You might have heard it called the One Canada Economy Act, or maybe the Building Canada Act.
Essentially, it's the federal government's toolkit designed to fast-track these major projects.
So our mission here is to unpack what's actually in Bill C-5, get why the government feels this, well, urgency.
Right.
And crucially, dig into the reactions, because they're really diverse, often clashing, coming from Indigenous leaders and communities all across the country.
Absolutely. You're going to hear about some deep concerns, things like treaty rights, self-determination, but also, perspectives looking at potential partnerships, maybe economic development opportunities. It's not all one thing.
To get you the clearest picture, we're pulling insights straight from where these talks are happening.
We've looked at the First Nations Major Projects Summit that just happened in Gatineau, Quebec. Prime Minister Mark Carney was there, meeting with hundreds of First Nations chiefs.
Okay.
And then we're also looking north to the Inuit Crown Partnership Committee meeting that was in Inuvik, Northwest Territories, co-chaired by the PM and Nitan Obed, who's the president of ITK, Inuit Tapirit Kanatami.
Got it. So insights from these key meetings, they should give us a real sort of pulse check on this whole conversation.
Exactly, a real-time snapshot.
Okay, let's unpack it then. Why the big push for C-5 right now? What's the government's stated reason?
Well, the official line is pretty clear. They say it's about boosting the economy, diversifying exports, getting less reliant on just the U.S. market.
Makes sense.
And building up northern infrastructure. That's a big one. And part of that is strategic, actually, helping Canada meet its NATO spending targets, bolstering Arctic defense. That's part of the mix.
Interesting. And the Prime Minister, Carney, he put it pretty directly, didn't he? Something about flipping the attitude?
Yeah, he said the act creates the ability to flip the attitude towards those projects. How can we help the project to move forward? So a very proactive stance.
Proactive, right. And they're pointing fingers at the old rules, Bill C-69, saying it held things back.
That's the narrative, yeah. That C-69 created too many hurdles, too many delays. So C-5 is framed as the fix, designed to actively help projects, not hinder them. It's a definite shift in philosophy.
Okay, so if C-69 was the problem, how exactly does C-5 plan to flip the attitude and speed things up? What's actually in the bill? What are the tools?
Well, the sources describe it as giving the federal government, sweeping new powers is the phrase used, powers to accelerate the whole permitting side of things.
Sweeping powers.
The core mechanism is pretty significant. It lets Cabinet use what are called emergency-like powers for projects they decide are in the national interest.
Emergency-like powers.
Okay. And this introduces something called upfront approval. That means a project can get the green light before things like the full environmental assessment is done, and even before the Crown's duty to consult with affected Indigenous communities.
Wait, before the duty to consult is fully completed, that's a big deal.
It is. The duty to consult, that's the government's legal obligation, right? To engage with Indigenous groups whose rights might be impacted. Under C-5, the approval can come first. Now, the project proponents, the companies, they still have to fulfill Ottawa's consultation obligations later on.
But the approval itself comes first.
Exactly. It shifts the timeline. And that's, where a lot of the friction comes in.
I can see why. And the definition of national interest, is that specific?
It's based on 5 criteria, things like, does it strengthen Canada's autonomy, resilience, security? Does it help fight climate change? Does it advance Indigenous people's interests? Pretty broad categories.
And you mentioned provinces are doing similar things.
Yeah, it's worth noting Ontario's got Bill 5, BC has Bill 15. Similar aims, provincial level, raises questions about how all these pieces fit together,
Definitely. Okay, so that's the mechanism. Now let's get to the reactions, because you said it's a real spectrum. Let's start with the Inuit leadership. You mentioned the meeting in Inuvik.
Right, the Inuit Crown Partnership Committee, co-chaired by PM Carney and Nitan Obed from ITK.
And what was the takeaway there?
Well, Obed said he got unequivocal reassurances from Carney, specifically that Bill C-5 will not interrupt the processes that have been set up under our modern treaties.
Okay, so treaty processes are protected.
That was the assurance. For environmental assessments, project reviews, things governed by their land claims agreements, Obed framed it as Inuit being full partners in these processes. He also stressed that their treaty provisions are enabling, not just vetoes.
Interesting distinction. Did anyone else back that up?
Crown Indigenous Relations Minister Rebecca Alty was there, and she said pretty plainly, at the end of the day, treaties are above this law. They have to be respected.
Okay, so strong reassurances for Inuit leadership based on their modern treaties. Given that framework, what kinds of projects are Northern leaders hoping C-5 might help move forward?
There are some really ambitious ones. You've got the Kavalik hydrofiber link that's connecting mainland Nunavut to Manitoba's power grid and bringing in high-speed internet. Big deal for those communities.
Huge.
There's the Grays Bay Port and Road Project. That's a deepwater port idea on Nunavut's mainland. Access to the Northwest Passage, critical minerals, potentially very strategic. Also, the Inuvialuit Energy Security Project near Inuvik, a domestic well, to tackle really high propane costs. And the Mackenzie Valley Road and the NWT is seen as a key defense link, too.
So big nation-building stuff. But amidst all that, were there other, maybe more fundamental concerns raised by Northern leaders? Things these big projects don't necessarily solve.
Oh, absolutely. They really hammered home the chronic underinvestment in just basic infrastructure. Healthcare gaps, too, like the lack of dental services, forcing people to travel, 1,000 kilometers.
Wow.
Food security issues, housing shortages. The basics are still a huge challenge.
So the big projects are welcome, maybe, but don't solve the underlying issues.
That's the sense. Oh, and related, there was the announcement of Virginia Mearns, an Inuk woman from Nunavut, as Canada's first Arctic ambassador. That was seen as a positive step by Inuit leaders.
Okay, now let's shift gears, because you said the picture changes quite a bit when we look at many First Nations leaders. Widespread opposition, frustration, even court challenges.
Yeah, that's right. The summit in Gatineau seems to have really brought things to a head for many.
Why? What happened there? You mentioned accusations of political theater.
That's exactly the phrase some leaders used. Grand Chief Stuart Phillip from the Union of BC Indian Chiefs, he called it a subjugation session, not a consultation session. Pretty blunt.
Subjugation session, wow.
Chief Craig Nuchtai from Atikameksheng Anishmalbek First Nation said, this summit is political theater. And Chief Archie Wabas, Windaman Lake First Nation, pointed out the law was drafted without us. It was debated without us. It was passed without us.
So a real feeling of being excluded from the process before the bill became law.
Completely. That they were being presented with something already decided and not genuinely consulted.
And Chief Karen Bell from Garden River First Nation, she raised a key point about rights, didn't she?
She did. She said, development is not the issue. It's about jurisdiction, treaty rights, respect. And she specifically brought up free, prior, and informed consent, FPIC, which is in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples.
FPIC. That's a crucial standard.
It is. And Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler from Nishnabieski Nation didn't mince words either, saying the laws stomp on treaty rights. Just fury from some leaders.
And there were issues with summit logistics, too.
Yeah, reports of sloppy organization, last-minute invitation changes, chiefs feeling they didn't get enough time to actually speak and be heard.
And then there was that really stark question from Chief Angela Vasseur.
Yeah, from Nissechawisik Cree Nation. In the conference app, she asked the Prime Minister directly if he would commit not to use military or police force against First Nations who resist projects approved under C-5.
And the response?
Silence. The question apparently went unanswered during the event.
That's silence. Speaks volumes, doesn't it? What does that unanswered question really tell us?
Well, it points to a deep, deep lack of trust, I think. A fear rooted in history, past conflicts over resources and land. It suggests that for some, the worry isn't just about the process, it's about what happens if the process fails and consent isn't given. Will rights be overridden? Potentially by force. That fear is clearly still there.
A really chilling undertone.
Yeah.
Beyond the process issues, specific health and environmental concerns were also front and center, right?
Yeah.
Particularly from the oil sands region.
Very much so. Chief Billy Joe Chikaro from Makisukri First Nation, his community, Fort Chipewyan, is right downstream from the oil sands. He talked about high cancer rates they believe are linked to pollution. He shared this really poignant memory of drinking water straight from the river as a kid. Something unthinkable now because of contaminants.
That's devastating.
And he brought up that big leak from Imperial Oil's Curl facility in 2023. It went unreported for 9 months. That just shattered any remaining trust for many.
Understandably.
Chief Takuro put it this way. In the oil sands, human health is usually our health. And we have seen fish have more rights than we do in these processes. Very powerful words.
Incredibly powerful. And he had a direct message for the prime minister.
He did. He said, "You want my consent, you improve my people's health." Simple as that. And he invited Carney to come visit Fort Chippewa and see the situation firsthand.
Wow. That's laying down a gauntlet, isn't it? Improve my people's health.
Mm.
What does that demand tell us about the gap between, say, Ottawa policy and lived reality?
It tells us that for communities on the front lines of industrial impact, abstract economic arguments just don't cut it if basic health and safety aren't protected first. It flips the script. Health and environment aren't just factors in development, they're prerequisites for it. For him, consent isn't about a project permit. It's about fixing the damage, past and present.
Right. And speaking of the oil sands, there's a huge carbon capture project proposed by the Pathways Alliance. Does it address these kinds of concerns?
Well, Chief Tuccaro raised flags about that, too. It's a massive project, initially pegged at $16.5 billion, but he voiced concern that it could just enable more oil sands production overall.
Ah, okay.
And crucially, he pointed out that carbon capture mainly deals with emissions at the source. It doesn't really tackle the downstream emissions when the fuel is actually burned, nor does it necessarily clean up the existing water and land contamination affecting his community now.
So not a silver bullet for the health concerns he raised. This frustration, it seems like it runs deep and connects to broader issues, too.
Absolutely. Chief Jeffrey Kokonis from Ojibways of Onigaming First Nation, he spoke about his community being in a decade-plus-long state of emergency because of suicides, poverty.
Third world levels of death and mortality rates, he said.
Heartbreaking. His point was that you can't just push for economic development while ignoring these fundamental human rights crises. Addressing basic well-being has to be part of the equation, if not the starting point.
It puts the whole nation-building idea in a different light.
It really does, and there's historical context here, too. Grand Chief Derek Nepinek from the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, he drew a direct line from Bill C-5 back to Stephen Harper's Bill C-45 in 2012.
The one that sparked Idle No More.
Exactly. He said chiefs are tired of being trotted out for photo opportunities, implying this feels like a repeat legislation pushed through with consultation that feels, to them, more like performance than real partnership.
And that comes back to the meaning of consultation, doesn't it? The lack of explicit, free, prior, and informed consent in the bill seems to be the core issue for many.
It really is. For many of these leaders, consultation isn't just a chance to voice concerns after a decision is basically made. It means the right to say yes, or the right to say no, the right to consent, or to withhold it. That's a fundamental difference in perspective from how the bill seems to operate.
Okay, so if we connect all these threads, what's the core tension here?
It's pretty stark, isn't it? On one hand, you've got the government's drive, economic growth, national security, building infrastructure framed as urgent national needs.
Right.
And on the other hand, you have Indigenous peoples asserting their inherent rights, their sovereignty, their right to self-determination over their lands and resources, rights affirmed by treaties, by the Constitution, by international declarations like UNDRIP.
A fundamental clash of priorities, or at least approaches.
Yeah. And while we heard some Indigenous communities do welcome the potential acceleration, you mentioned some in Alberta, the Manitoba Metis Federation, the really deep divisions, the strong opposition, particularly from many First Nations, suggests this isn't going away. We could see more challenges, maybe more protests. It shows there's just no single Indigenous position on this.
No easy answers. It really highlights how crucial that meaningful consultation is, doesn't it? And respecting the distinctions between First Nations, Inuit, and Metis peoples.
Absolutely critical. Real partnership, genuine, distinctions-based consultation. Without that, these big ambitions are probably going to keep hitting major roadblocks, and it's hard to see how that advances reconciliation.
So this deep dive, it's really shown us the complex map around Bill C-5. There's the government's vision economy, security, the North.
Yeah, big national vision.
And then layered over that, or maybe underneath it, are all these very deeply felt Indigenous perspectives. Concerns about rights, health, the environment, but also hopes for partnership, for benefit.
It's striking how one law can land so differently, isn't it? Reassurances and opportunity for some, but perceived threats and political theater for others. It really paints a picture of the diverse realities across Canada.
It really does. So as you're thinking about all this, here's something to chew on. How does a country like Canada square these things? Balance these urgent economic and security goals with the fundamental principles of indigenous rights, self-determination, and, the long-term health of communities and the land itself.
It's the multi-billion-dollar question, really.
What kind of better Canada are we actually building when these powerful and sometimes opposing visions collide? Something to think about.